I only learnt this fact recently, but the churches of the Orthodox tradition, Greek, Romanian, Russian, and the like, don't read from the book of Revelation. As the most recently written book of the Bible, they consider it just to be a wee bit too modern, a little bit suspect. And it certainly is a very strange book. And we rarely read from it either, but we're going to today. Our passage this morning comes from the last chapter of this book of visions. In the first few chapters of Genesis, right at the beginning of the Bible, there is the story of humanity rebelling against the divine. And then in the last few chapters of Revelation, right at the other end of the Bible, we are offered a vision of humanity and divinity reconciled. One of the more well-known passages of Revelation says this. It says, "Death will be no more. Mourning and pain will pass away. All things will be made new." But the particular reason why I have chosen for us to hear this passage from Revelation today, which Barbara is about to read for us, is that it has provided the inspiration for the design of this table. After an extraordinary series of visions, some of them deeply disturbing, eventually Revelation leads us to a vision of a city, a street, a stream of crystal clear water, and a tree. I want to start with the idea of a city, because I hope it will help us to find ourselves in this vision. For a city is not a living thing if it is just roads and buildings. A city only lives if it has people in it. The true essence of a city is a great gathering of people living alongside one another, interacting in an uncountable host of ways. This is the important idea. A city as a gathering of people. And that's what we are too, as a congregation, a gathering of people. The writer of Revelation describes in his vision a river running through a city, down the center of a street where people gathered, where life was lived. People have gathered by rivers for millennia and have built their cities there. Think of Inverness, Perth, Glasgow, London, Paris, Rome, Budapest, Prague, Baghdad on the side of the Euphrates, dozens of other cities, all built on the banks of a river. And Dalkeith itself, bounded by two rivers, one to the north and one to the south. So many cities have rivers running through them. For many, these rivers have been the source of and the route to their prosperity. The river is a blessing for the city. The river is a blessing for the people. Now look down at the floor. Running up the middle of the church, through this gathering of the people, there is a channel. It's not a river, of course. It's where the heating pipes are located. But let's not let that prosaic detail concern us. Churches are built symbolic statements. They are full of symbolism, much of it intended, but even mundane things like heating pipe channels may occasionally be pressed into symbolic service. So, let this channel, bridged by this iron lattice work, symbolize a river running through this gathering of the people. Standing over it is this table. The table has been made for this space, and in some senses it is intended to be in dialogue with it. And I hope you'll forgive me if I take a few minutes to talk about it and explain some of the ideas and the symbolism in it. First of all, it's made of ash, solid ash. I chose this wood for a number of reasons. First of all, the colour. I wanted a light wood to bring out the idea of light, which is so important in the gospel. Christ, the light of the world. Ash is considered to be an ordinary wood, not particularly fancy, certainly not exotic, more often used for tool handles because of its resistance to impact than it is for furniture. Communion is an occasion in which we bring the ordinary things of life, bread and wine, and ask God to make them holy, to make them special. It's also an act to which we bring our own ordinariness, and we ask God to make us holy, and to remind us that God sees us as special in his sight. So a table made of ordinary wood seems an appropriate place for a holy and special act. If you were to crawl underneath it and look up, you'd see that there's a big knot in the wood which has been left rough and open. When we come to the Lord's table to eat and drink what he has prepared, each one of us brings our wounds, our flaws, our imperfections, some of them obvious, many more that we take care to hide from sight. And the wound in the wood of the table speaks of that. It's hidden, but it's there, part of the table, as our wounds are part of us. The wood for this table comes from 2 trees which grew near duns in the borders. There are, I think, good ecological reasons for using native woods, minimizing emissions from transporting them. But there's also something about the value of context. Christianity has always been a religion which has adapted to and reflected each local context. And I think that using wood which has from forest to sawmill to workshop to here travelled less than 80 miles is a little sign of that. It is an offering of our land, something which in an era of globalized production, especially of food, is increasingly rare and precious. Being native, ash trees have a long history and deep cultural significance. They often grow on the banks of rivers, their roots reaching down into the water. In Norse mythology, ash trees were often associated with places where healing was sought. The word ash appears in a number of place names, particularly those south of the border, indicating that ash trees were landmarks, perhaps even meeting places. And a communion table is just that, a place where we meet one another, a place where we seek to meet our brother Jesus, a place we seek healing. And the act of celebrating the sacrament together is a landmark in the life of faith, something we move towards, something which points the way forward. The shape of the table is deliberate, and it's supposed to be reminiscent of a tree. There are natural edges where the only shaping has been the removal of the bark. There are little channels where beetles have burrowed under the bark. Like a tree, it rises from the roots to the trunk to the branches, with the top being the canopy, its shape organic and irregular. In Christianity, in Christian imagery, trees are so important. We remembered at the beginning of the service the legend of Genesis and the tree there being the place where the breakdown of humanity's relationship with the divine is depicted. In the Gospels, it is on a tree, the cross, where Christ reaches out his arms in self-giving, reconciling embrace. And as we've heard in our reading today, in the closing verses of the last book of the Bible, there is a vision of a tree whose leaves are for the healing of the nations. The biblical story comes full circle, and trees stand as landmarks along the way. Much of what this table symbolizes spills over into our celebration of harvest. For today is a day of thankfulness for the good things God provides. Today is a day for meeting with one another, and also, in a small way, for meeting the needs of others who do not have enough, which we do through our donations to Storehouse. In the meeting of the needs of others, this day is also a day of healing, because hunger, deprivation, inequality and inequity are diseases in the body of the whole of society. And in conscious thankfulness, in generous sharing, in meeting to offer one another healing in the act of communion, this is a day for justice. It is a day for the whole gathering of the people to drink from the crystal clear stream of the water of life, to sit around the tree of life, its roots on both sides of the river of life, its branches bearing fruit for every month in every year, its leaves for the healing of the nations. This is a day, as are all days, to remember and give thanks that we who are rooted in the life-giving gospel of Christ are ourselves the leaves of the tree of life, called together, instructed by the word, nourished by the sacraments, healed and restored and given new life, rooted in our community, God says to each one of us, you are for the healing of the nations. Amen.